Landon Green's heart raced as he pulled up to the office building on Christmas Eve, his hands tightly gripping the steering wheel. He had never expected to be back here, not tonight of all nights. The building was eerily quiet, the parking lot nearly empty except for his car. He had just gotten off a long shift and was ready for a quiet evening, a moment of peace to himself. Yet, the strange gift he had found earlier that day, wrapped in glittering paper with no note attached, had driven him to return to the office. Curiosity gnawed at him like an itch he couldn't scratch. Who left the gift, and why? He couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to it, something waiting for him to uncover. The halls of the building were empty, save for the soft hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. He walked through the quiet corridors, his footsteps echoing as he made his way to the elevator. When the doors opened, the emptiness seemed to swallow him whole. But then, as he passed the 25th floor, something caught his attention. The light in Kendra Hayes' office, the CEO of the company he worked for, was still on. It was unusual. Normally, at this hour, the building would be locked up tight, especially on a holiday. Intrigued, Landon found himself walking toward her office. It wasn't like him to intrude, but something about the situation felt off. He couldn't stop himself. He had to know. As he approached the office door, he paused. It was cracked open, just enough for him to catch a glimpse inside. There she was, Kendra, the powerful and commanding CEO, standing by the window with her back to him. She was in the middle of undressing, seemingly unaware of his presence. Landon's breath caught in his throat. He should have turned away, but his feet felt rooted to the spot. His mind screamed for him to retreat, but his body wouldn't obey. For a brief moment he watched her, the vulnerability of the moment stark against her usual professional demeanor. But then Kendra turned around, her eyes locking with his. The air between them seemed to freeze. Landon's face flushed with embarrassment, his heart thudding in his chest. He stammered, barely able to get the words out. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." Kendra's expression softened. A smile crept onto her face, one that was at once warm and unsettling. "Landon," she said, her voice calm, "what are you doing here?" The tension in the room was palpable, and Landon felt as though the walls were closing in on him. He could barely make sense of what was happening. Here he was, standing in front of one of the most powerful women in the city, caught in a situation he couldn't have imagined in his wildest dreams. Before he could respond, Kendra stepped toward him, her presence commanding the space between them. She wasn't angry, not at all. Instead, she seemed almost intrigued by the awkwardness of the moment. "It's all right, Landon," she said, her voice laced with something deeper. "I'm not upset. But what you saw? It's not just an accident, is it?" Landon felt his stomach drop. There was something about the way Kendra spoke, something that hinted at a greater unspoken truth. It was as if she had been expecting him, or at least this moment. Her words hung in the air, thick with possibility. "Landon," Kendra continued, taking another step closer, "I know what you've been thinking. I've seen the way you've looked at me. There's no need to pretend." She paused, her eyes locking onto his with an intensity that sent a chill through him. "Ever since the first time I saw you in the office, I couldn't get you out of my mind." Landon stood frozen. The world seemed to tilt beneath his feet. The woman who commanded every boardroom, every conference call, and every meeting was now standing in front of him, confessing that she had been thinking about him. His mind raced, trying to process what was happening. Kendra Hayes, the CEO, the married woman, had noticed him. Not just as a janitor, but as something more. Something she wanted. "I've been trying to ignore it," Kendra continued, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "I've been fighting this feeling, but it's been eating at me for months. I can't stop thinking about you, Landon. I can't stop wanting you." The weight of her confession hit him like a ton of bricks. The pull of temptation was undeniable, but Landon's mind screamed for him to stop. This wasn't right. She was married to one of the wealthiest men in the city. She was the CEO, a woman with power, status, and influence. He was a single dad, a janitor, struggling to make ends meet. There was no place for someone like him in her world. But as Kendra's eyes softened and her hand reached out to gently touch his chest, the words he wanted to say caught in his throat. "I know this is wrong," she said, her voice shaking slightly, "but I can't help it. I've wanted you, Landon. More than I've ever wanted anyone. Please, don't make me beg." Landon felt the conflict within him grow stronger. His mind told him to walk away. This was a mistake, a temptation he couldn't afford. But his heart, driven by emotions he had never expected to feel, pulled him in another direction. Kendra was so close now, so vulnerable, and in that moment, the line between right and wrong seemed to blur. "I shouldn't be here," Landon whispered, stepping back, his body trembling. "You're married. I don't belong in your world." Kendra's eyes softened, but her hand remained on his chest. "Landon, I know what I'm asking, but I need you. I've never needed anyone like this before. You don't understand, but I can't keep this inside anymore. Please, just for tonight." The words hung in the air, heavy with desire and guilt. Landon's heart raced as he took another step back. He couldn't do this. He couldn't give in. Not like this. Not to a married woman, not to someone who was so far out of his league. But Kendra's words cut through the noise in his mind. "I've been watching you, Landon. I know you've been struggling. I know how hard you work to give your daughter everything. I know you. And I need you. Please." Landon closed his eyes, the weight of the decision pressing on him like a physical force. The temptation was strong, but so was the pull of what was right. His daughter Zara was at the forefront of his thoughts. His responsibility to her future, was more important than any fleeting moment of desire. "I can't," Landon finally said, his voice cracking. "I can't do this. I won't." Kendra's face fell, the intensity in her eyes shifting to something more vulnerable. "I understand," she whispered, stepping back, her shoulders slumping slightly. "But you should know, Landon, I won't forget this night, and neither will you." Landon turned and walked away, the door closing softly behind him. The weight of the decision sat heavily on his chest as he descended the stairs, the cold air of Christmas Eve biting at his skin. As he stepped into the parking lot, his heart still pounded, but there was a sense of relief. He had made the right choice. But as he started his car and drove home, he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. What had just happened would haunt him, and he knew that this night would change everything in ways he couldn't yet understand. If you're still with me, I'd love for you to subscribe to my channel Masquebond Stories for more tales that will keep you at the edge of your seat. Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and let's talk about the choices we make when temptation is at our door. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Thank you for being part of this journey. Landon's hands gripped the steering wheel as he drove through the quiet streets, the familiar weight of confusion and guilt pressing on his chest. His thoughts raced, a jumble of emotions and questions he couldn't answer. What had just happened? What had Kendra truly wanted from him? And why did he feel like he was walking away from something that could have changed his entire life? He had made the right decision. He was sure of it. But the nagging feeling that he had missed an opportunity lingered, refusing to fade. His mind kept drifting back to her words. "I need you, Landon." The intensity with which she had said it. He had seen the desperation in her eyes, the raw vulnerability that almost seemed to strip away the professional mask she wore so effortlessly in the office. He couldn't ignore it. The magnetism of it, the way she had pulled him into her world, if only for a moment. But he had resisted. He had walked away, making the difficult choice to protect his values and his daughter. Zara, his little girl, was the only thing that mattered now. He couldn't afford to jeopardize his relationship with her, to let anything, especially someone like Kendra, stand in the way of his role as her father. Fatherhood was a responsibility he would never compromise. Still, as the miles passed, Landon found himself torn. Was he really doing the right thing by leaving the office that night? Could he have used the opportunity to change his life for the better? And what about Kendra? What had driven her to make such a bold, unexpected move? Why him? Before he could process any more of his swirling thoughts, his phone buzzed in the passenger seat. Landon glanced at it quickly. It was a message from Zara's school. Emergency. Please contact us immediately. The message hit him like a cold wave. His stomach twisted into knots. Was Zara okay? Had something happened to her? He hadn't been expecting this. His heart pounded as he pulled over to the side of the road and read the message again. The text didn't provide much information, just a sense of urgency. Without thinking, Landon called the school. The phone rang several times before someone finally picked up. Mr. Green? The voice on the other end was a calm, professional tone that did nothing to settle the panic rising in his chest. This is Miss Winters from Zara's school. I'm afraid there's been an incident with your daughter. We need you to come immediately. Landon's breath hitched. What happened? Is she all right? She's fine for now, but she's a bit shaken up. She was involved in a confrontation with another student. We believe it's something you'll want to address in person. Please come as soon as you can. Landon's mind raced as he quickly turned the car around. What could possibly have happened? Zara had always been a kind and quiet child, never one to get involved in fights. Who would she be in conflict with? He couldn't shake the feeling that something had gone terribly wrong. The road ahead felt longer than it ever had before. When he finally pulled up to the school, Landon hurried inside, his pace quickening as he tried to make sense of the situation. Zara was sitting in the school office, her legs crossed and her eyes red. She looked up when he entered, her expression a mix of confusion and concern. His heart sank when he saw her tear-streaked face. Zara? He rushed to her side, crouching down to her level. What happened? Are you all right? Zara sniffled and wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I'm okay, Daddy. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for things to go that far. Landon's heart tightened as he looked at his daughter. His protective instincts kicked in. What happened? Tell me, sweetheart. Zara hesitated, her voice trembling. There was a boy at school. His name is Chris. He's been picking on me for weeks, calling me names, pushing me around. Today, he pushed me again, and I don't know. I just couldn't take it anymore. I pushed him back. Landon's chest tightened with frustration, but it wasn't at Zara. It was at Chris and every other person who had ever bullied his daughter. He wanted to go to that boy and demand an explanation, but he swallowed the urge and focused on Zara. Zara, listen to me. You did the right thing by standing up for yourself. No one has the right to treat you like that. You're strong, and I'm proud of you for speaking up. Zara's lip trembled as she wiped more tears from her cheeks. But I didn't mean to hurt him, Daddy. I don't know what came over me. I got so mad, and I didn't know what to do. Landon pulled her into a tight hug, his heart breaking as he held her. You didn't hurt him, sweetheart. You defended yourself. Sometimes, when people push us too far, we react. That doesn't make you a bad person. You're not in trouble. The principal, Miss Winters, stepped into the room, her demeanor professional but compassionate. Mr. Green, I understand Zara's upset, but I need to let you know that the other students' parents will be contacted. We don't tolerate any form of bullying here, and we'll take steps to address the situation. Landon nodded, his mind still focused on Zara. He was glad the school was taking it seriously, but his priority now was comforting her, making sure she felt safe again. He knew this was a moment that would stick with her. It was a moment of reckoning for both of them. As they left the school, Landon kept Zara close, offering her quiet words of reassurance. It had been a difficult night for both of them, and the last thing Landon needed was more emotional turmoil. But as they walked to the car, the weight of the earlier events, Kendra's confession, the confusing pull of temptation, hung in the back of his mind. Landon had made his choice. He had walked away from something that could have changed everything, something that might have made his life easier. But as he looked at Zara, he realized that there was no decision more important than the one he had made. He had chosen his daughter. He had chosen to be the kind of father Zara deserved. And even though the night had left him emotionally drained and full of questions, Landon was more certain than ever of the path he was on. He was doing the right thing. If you're still with me, I invite you to subscribe to Masquebond Stories, where we dive deep into the lives of characters like Landon, who face difficult decisions, but always choose what's right in the end. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What would you do if you were in Landon's shoes? Let's talk about it. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next story that'll leave you thinking long after it's over. Thank you for being part of this journey. Landon drove home in silence, his thoughts a swirling storm that wouldn't settle. Zara, quiet in the passenger seat beside him, had finally fallen asleep, exhaustion taking over after the emotional roller coaster of the evening. The quiet hum of the engine was the only sound that filled the car, but Landon's mind refused to find peace. As he turned the corner into their apartment complex, he couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that had plagued him since his encounter with Kendra. The powerful CEO's words, the almost desperate intensity in her confession, echoed in his ears. His stomach twisted at the memory. He had done the right thing by walking away. He had to have. Yet the more he thought about it, the harder it was to reconcile the lingering desire to understand why she had confessed to him in the first place. Why him? He had always seen himself as ordinary, just a regular guy trying to get by. He was a janitor at her office, nothing more. And yet, in one moment, everything had shifted. In her eyes, he had seen something that made him feel like more than just a man in overworked clothes. Landon rubbed his eyes as he parked the car. He had so many questions, but none that he could answer. He was just lost. And Zara, despite everything, had been his anchor tonight, the one constant that kept him grounded. He couldn't let anything, not even Kendra's confession, throw him off course. Zara needed him. She was his world. As Landon walked through the door, he carefully took off his shoes, trying to make as little noise as possible. The apartment was small, cozy, and filled with the familiar warmth of their everyday life. Zara had already made it her own, with little trinkets and drawings scattered across the counter. Landon smiled to himself, grateful for the simple beauty of their life together. He checked on Zara, making sure she was tucked in, her favorite stuffed bear resting by her side. He stood there for a moment, watching her sleep, and his chest tightened with love for her. It was moments like this that reminded him why he fought so hard every day. Why he had given up his dreams of a better life. She was worth every sacrifice. But in the back of his mind, Kendra's voice still lingered. I need you. The words haunted him in the silence of the night. What was he supposed to do with this? He had never been one to get caught up in drama, let alone office affairs. But Kendra's honesty, her vulnerability, left him with more questions than answers. He paced the small living room, running his hand through his hair in frustration. This wasn't just about temptation anymore. This was about something deeper, about his identity, and how a single moment had the power to make him question everything he had thought was true about himself. Suddenly, his phone buzzed. Landon picked it up, half expecting it to be another message from the school or some update on Zara. But it wasn't. It was from an unknown number. Landon, we need to talk. It's urgent. His heart skipped a beat. It was Kendra. His first instinct was to ignore it, to just move on, to forget about the office and everything that had happened. But something tugged at him. Something he couldn't ignore. He stared at the screen, his finger hovering over the keyboard. What was she asking for now? Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Landon typed back, his hands trembling slightly. What's this about? He hit send before he could change his mind. His pulse quickened as he waited for her response. The reply came almost instantly. I know you're confused, but I can't let this go. I've been thinking about you all night. I need to explain what happened. Landon stared at the screen, his breath shallow. He could feel the pull again, the temptation to pick up the phone and call her, to hear her voice, to understand her. But he knew he couldn't. He just couldn't. Instead, he placed the phone face down on the counter and walked to the window. The city below was quiet, lit only by the soft glow of streetlights. It was hard to believe that just hours ago his life had been turned upside down. And yet, in the midst of it all, the answer seemed clear. He had made the right choice. He had chosen Zara. He had chosen his family. Nothing, no matter how intense, no matter how powerful the attraction, could change that. He wouldn't let it. As Landon stood by the window, the weight of the day slowly began to settle over him. The confusion, the guilt, the temptation, all of it started to feel more manageable. But Kendra's message still burned in his mind. He had made his decision, but what would happen next? That was the question that loomed large, one that had no clear answer yet. Just then, Landon heard a noise behind him. It was Zara, standing at the entrance to the room, her small frame bathed in the soft light from the hallway. "Daddy?" she whispered, rubbing her eyes. "Are you okay?" Landon turned to her, his heart swelling with affection. He crouched down to her level, brushing a lock of hair away from her face. "I'm okay, sweetheart. Just thinking." She climbed into his arms, resting her head on his shoulder. "I'm glad you're home." Landon smiled, feeling the weight of the world lift. If only for a moment. His daughter was his world, and no temptation, no mistake, no confusion could ever change that. "I'm always here for you, Zara. Always." As he held her close, a sense of calm washed over him. He didn't know what would happen with Kendra or where his choices would lead him. But right now, in this moment, he was exactly where he needed to be, with the person who mattered most. The soft hum of the city outside was the only sound as Landon sat by the window. Zara still nestled against him, her small breaths a comforting reminder of everything he was fighting for. His mind was still a whirlwind of thoughts. Kendra's confession, the strange encounter, and the messages that had followed. He couldn't escape the pull of those moments, the voice of temptation that echoed in his head. But as Zara drifted off to sleep in his arms, a quiet sense of peace began to settle over him. This holding his daughter, knowing she was safe, knowing he had made the right decision, this was the reality he had to hold on to. This was his life, and nothing would change that. As the night wore on, Landon lay beside Zara in her small bed, the soft glow of the nightlight casting gentle shadows on the walls. He wasn't sure if he'd sleep, but he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't keep living in the what-ifs. He had made a choice, and now it was time to live with it, no matter how difficult it might seem. But that night, as he closed his eyes, the sound of his phone vibrating on the counter broke through the silence. He groaned, wishing it would just stop, but curiosity got the better of him. Slipping quietly out of bed so as not to wake Zara, he grabbed his phone. It was another message from Kendra. "Landon, I understand you're conflicted, but I need to see you. I need to explain everything face to face. You owe it to yourself to hear me out, please." He stared at the screen for a long moment. The message was simple, but the underlying urgency in her words struck him. She was insistent, almost desperate, but that wasn't what caught his attention. It was the way she phrased it, the implication that something more was at stake than just their brief encounter. Did she think he owed her something? Or was it simply guilt, a need for closure that drove her? Landon felt a pit form in his stomach. He had always been one to walk away from drama, to keep his head down and focus on what mattered. Zara mattered. Yet, there was something nagging at him, something unresolved that Kendra's message had brought to the surface again. The phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't just a message, it was a call. Landon stared at the screen, his finger hovering over the answer button. The temptation to pick up was overwhelming, but the quiet in his apartment, the peaceful rhythm of Zara's breathing, kept him grounded. He knew that picking up the phone would be a step toward something he wasn't sure he wanted. Yet the pull was there, stronger than he cared to admit. Landon hesitated. It was one thing to walk away when he had made a clean break from the situation, but now it felt like he was on the edge of a precipice. One conversation away from falling into a mess he couldn't control. But something told him he had to hear her out. He wasn't sure why. Maybe it was the weight of her confession, or maybe it was the guilt of leaving things unfinished. Whatever it was, he couldn't ignore it any longer. With a steadying breath, Landon answered the phone. "Hello?" There was a moment of silence before Kendra's voice came through. Softer than he expected. "Landon." He sat back against the wall, still trying to focus on Zara, who was sleeping soundly. "I told you I couldn't do this. I've made my choice. I understand." Her voice faltered, almost as if she were holding back tears. "But I can't just let this go, Landon. I need you to understand. It's not just about what happened between us. It's about something more, something I can't explain over text." Landon closed his eyes, feeling the weight of her words settle in his chest. What did she mean by that? What was she really asking for? "You don't have to explain anything to me, Kendra." His voice was firm now, the decision already made. "I can't be a part of whatever this is. You have a husband. A life? I'm just trying to do what's best for my daughter." There was a long pause. Landon could hear Kendra's steady breathing on the other end of the line, the silence thick with unspoken words. "I know this isn't right. I know I've crossed a line. But when you feel something, when you feel it that deeply, you can't just walk away. I thought I could, but I can't. I won't pretend like I don't feel something for you anymore." Her words were soft, full of regret. "I've been lying to myself, and maybe I'm just looking for an answer, Landon, but I need to know if you feel anything for me at all." Landon's heart pounded in his chest as he sat there, unsure of what to say. There was a part of him, a small part, that wanted to reach out, to say something that would make the situation easier. But he knew that this wasn't his mess to clean up. "I don't know what you want from me." His voice broke a little, the emotions swirling in him, threatening to spill over. "I can't give you what you're asking for. I can't be what you need. I've got my daughter to think about, Kendra. You don't get to just walk into my life and expect everything to change." Another long pause. This time, Kendra didn't speak. Landon could feel the weight of her silence pressing down on him, but he couldn't find it in himself to apologize. This wasn't his fault. "I'm sorry, Landon," Kendra finally said, her voice small. I thought I could change everything, but I guess I was wrong." Landon closed his eyes, the exhaustion of the day weighing heavily on him. What was he supposed to do with this? "You're not wrong, Kendra, but you need to figure this out on your own, and I need to go back to what matters most." He sighed deeply, his resolve growing stronger. "I'm sorry, but I'm walking away. I can't help you with this. Not anymore." Before she could respond, he hung up. Landon stared at the phone in his hand, the silence in the room nearly suffocating him. He felt a pang of guilt, but he also felt a strange sense of relief. He had made the right choice. Zara needed him. That was all that mattered. As he sat back against the couch, Landon took a long breath, feeling the weight of the decision settle within him. He had chosen his daughter over everything else. It wasn't easy, but it was the only way forward. Landon set the phone down with a finality that felt both liberating and heavy. He took a deep breath, leaning back into the worn cushions of the couch, his eyes drifting to the quiet bedroom where Zara slept peacefully. He tried to shake off the lingering tension from the conversation with Kendra, but it was impossible. The weight of what had just happened clung to him like a shadow, a presence he couldn't escape. Why had she reached out to him? He kept asking himself the same question, knowing it had to be about more than the fleeting moments they had shared. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized he couldn't afford to get lost in it. His daughter needed him. As the night stretched on, Landon's mind refused to let go of the conversation, and no matter how hard he tried, sleep remained elusive. His phone sat on the coffee table, an ever-present reminder of everything that had happened and everything he was leaving behind. He had made his choice. He had to make his choice. There could be no turning back now. But was it the right one? The clock on the wall ticked steadily, marking the passing hours. It was nearing 3 a.m., but Landon couldn't quiet the questions racing through his mind. Was he really doing the right thing? Had he made a mistake? Suddenly, the soft, familiar sound of a door creaking open broke the silence, and Landon's heart jumped into his throat. He turned, already knowing it was Zara. "Daddy?" Zara's small voice was soft, her tired eyes peering through the doorframe. Landon's heart swelled with love for her. Without thinking, he got up from the couch and crossed the room, pulling her into his arms. "What's wrong, baby?" he asked gently, running his hand through her hair. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she clung to him tighter, her small frame trembling slightly. Landon felt the heat of her tears soaking into his shirt. "I'm scared, Daddy," she whispered. "Why are you so sad?" Landon's throat tightened. He had been trying so hard to shield her from the weight of his own struggles, from the complicated, messy reality of everything happening around them. But his daughter saw through it all. She always had. "It's nothing, sweetheart, just grown-up stuff." He tried to smile down at her, brushing a lock of hair from her face. "Don't worry about it. I'm okay." Zara wasn't convinced. Her eyes searched his face for any sign of reassurance, and the more Landon tried to calm her, the more he realized that he couldn't shield her from everything. Zara deserved the truth, at least part of it. Sometimes, grown-ups get sad too. Landon's voice cracked slightly as he spoke, but he forced the words out. "I'm just trying to figure some things out, but it's all going to be okay." Zara looked up at him with wide eyes, her expression a mix of concern and love. Then, without saying another word, she wrapped her arms around him, squeezing him tightly. "I love you, Daddy," she murmured. Landon's chest tightened, the weight of her words crashing over him. There was no question, she was everything. "I love you too, sweetheart. More than anything." For the next few minutes they just stood there, Landon holding Zara in his arms, letting the world outside slip away. In that moment, it was as though nothing else mattered. The drama, the uncertainty, the temptation, it all seemed insignificant in the face of the love he had for his daughter. Eventually, Zara pulled back, her small hand wiping her eyes as she sniffled. "Daddy, can I stay with you tonight?" Landon nodded, his heart swelling once again. "Of course, sweetheart, you can always stay with me." He led her back to the couch, wrapping the blanket around them both, and as Zara laid her head on his shoulder, Landon couldn't help but feel the quiet ache in his heart. The world outside might be filled with complications, but this small moment of peace, of pure love, was everything. The night slowly passed, and as the first light of dawn peeked through the window, Landon felt his body relax for the first time in what seemed like hours. He watched his daughter sleep soundly beside him, her small breaths slow and steady. His mind drifted again, but this time it was different. He had made his choice. He wasn't going to let anyone or anything shake him from his purpose. He was Zara's father, and that meant more than anything else. No matter how hard things got, no matter how much Kendra's words echoed in his mind, he had to focus on Zara. She was the future. The reason he woke up every day, the reason he kept going. But just as his thoughts began to settle, his phone buzzed once more, pulling him from his quiet reflection. He looked at the screen, his stomach twisting as he saw that it was another message from Kendra. "Landon, please. I'm not asking for much, but I need you to hear me out. Let me explain everything. I need closure." Landon stared at the message for a moment, torn between his resolve and the unanswered questions that lingered. He had already made his decision. He had to stay strong. For Zara. But the urge to understand Kendra, to find out what she truly wanted from him, gnawed at him. What had he left behind? Was there something he should have heard? He took a deep breath, placing the phone face down. It didn't matter. He had already walked away. There would be no going back. The silence of the morning was broken only by the sound of Zara's soft breathing, and for the first time in days, Landon felt a semblance of peace. There was no perfect solution to his tangled emotions, but he could start with what was clear. Zara was his world, and he would protect her with everything he had. As the morning light began to brighten the room, Landon let the lingering doubt slip away, choosing to focus on the present. He was a father, and nothing else mattered. If you're still with me, join the conversation below and share your thoughts. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between personal desires and family? What would you have done in Landon's shoes? And don't forget to subscribe to Masquebond Stories for more deep, thought-provoking narratives. Your support means everything. As the morning sunlight streamed through the window, Landon stretched his arms above his head and glanced at Zara, still sound asleep beside him. A peaceful calm had settled over the apartment, the chaos of the previous night fading into the quiet hum of a new day. But even as he enjoyed the tranquility, a nagging feeling lingered at the back of his mind. Could he really leave everything behind? The weight of that unanswered question gnawed at him, but his gaze shifted to Zara's peaceful face, and for a brief moment he felt the world settle into place. Zara shifted slightly, mumbling in her sleep, and he smiled. Despite everything, despite the mess of life's complications, this was where he belonged. With her. No matter what had happened with Kendra, no matter how close he had come to crossing a line, his daughter was the one who needed him. She was his anchor. Landon had always prided himself on being strong for Zara. He had done everything to shield her from the world's difficulties, tried to keep her life simple, filled with love and comfort. But now, more than ever, he understood how fragile that illusion of control was. Life was messy, people were complicated, and he had to face it all, for her. A few minutes later, Zara stirred and blinked up at him, her eyes wide and innocent. "Good morning, Daddy," she smiled, stretching as she sat up, the sunlight catching in her hair. "Morning, sweetheart," Landon smiled back, his heart softening. "How'd you sleep?" "Good. I'm glad we're together." She grinned, her little hand reaching for his. Landon brushed a hand over her hair, feeling the bond between them tighten. She was everything. He helped her out of bed, and they made breakfast together. It was a quiet morning, just the two of them, enjoying each other's company. As they sat down to eat, Landon's phone buzzed again, interrupting the moment. His hand hesitated over it, but after a few seconds he picked it up. Another message from Kendra. "Landon, please. I can't stop thinking about you. I just need to talk. Let me explain what's really going on." Landon's fingers tightened around the phone as he read the message. His mind raced. What did she want now? He had made his decision. He had to move on. But there was still a part of him that wanted to know, to understand. Was there something important he was missing? He glanced over at Zara, who was humming softly as she ate her cereal, completely unaware of the internal conflict that was brewing within him. It didn't matter. He couldn't let his curiosity or any unresolved feelings interfere with what mattered most. "Daddy?" Zara's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "Can we go to the park today? I want to go on the swings." Landon smiled, relieved by her simple request. Of course, sweetie. Let's finish breakfast, and then we'll head out. As they finished their meal, Landon set the phone aside, deciding to push the questions about Kendra out of his mind for now. Zara needed him, and that was all he could focus on. He wasn't about to let some unresolved drama derail his life, not when he had so much to give to his daughter. After breakfast, they bundled up in coats and scarves, heading out to the park. The cold air bit at Landon's cheeks, but he didn't mind. It felt like a clean break, a chance to clear his head. They spent hours at the park, Zara running around and laughing on the swings, climbing on the jungle gym, her joy contagious. For a while, Landon let himself be absorbed in the simple happiness of it all, basking in the purity of the moment. As the afternoon wore on, Landon found himself alone on a bench, watching Zara play with other children. He couldn't help but smile. This was his world, the world he had built, the world that mattered. He didn't need anything else, not the complications of Kendra's emotions, not the uncertainty about what might have been. The sun was setting when they finally decided to leave the park, the sky turning orange and purple as they walked home. Zara chattered excitedly about the new friends she'd made, her energy boundless, her eyes alight with life. Landon couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude for her innocence, for the way she saw the world as full of possibility and love. As they reached their apartment building, Landon's phone buzzed once more. This time, it wasn't a message from Kendra. It was a call, an unknown number. Landon hesitated, then answered. "Mr. Green?" A voice said on the other end. It was a man's voice, official sounding. "This is Officer Daniels from the local precinct. We have a situation regarding the incident at Zara's school. Can you come in to discuss it?" Landon's stomach dropped. What now? He glanced at Zara, who was now tugging on his sleeve, ready to go inside. "Yes, of course. What happened?" Landon's voice was steady, but inside his heart was racing. "There's been a development with the other student involved in the altercation. We need to speak with you as soon as possible." Landon felt the tension in his chest tighten. What did this mean? What could have happened now? Was it about Chris, the boy who had been bullying Zara? "I'll be there soon," Landon said, his voice firm but his mind whirling. He ended the call and looked down at Zara, who was smiling up at him with excitement, unaware of the change in his mood. "Sweetheart, we need to go to the station for a little bit. Something happened at school." Landon crouched down to her level, trying to keep the worry out of his voice. Zara tilted her head, confused. "Is everything okay?" Landon smiled, brushing his hand over her hair. "Everything will be fine, honey. Don't worry." As they walked out of the building, Landon's mind was a whirlwind of emotions. He had been so focused on Kendra, on the complications that had arisen between them, that he had pushed aside what truly mattered. Zara's safety, her happiness, her future. Those were the things that needed his attention now, not the drama that he couldn't change. But as he stood outside, waiting for a cab to take them to the station, he couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. As Landon and Zara arrived at the precinct, the tension in the air was palpable. Zara, her little hand tightly clutching his, noticed the change in his demeanor. He tried to reassure her with a smile, but it felt forced. His mind was racing, trying to piece together what had happened at school. He had hoped this would be a simple situation, a misunderstanding that could be cleared up quickly. But as they walked into the police station, the feeling that something bigger was at play settled deep in his chest. An officer led them down a long hallway, the fluorescent lights overhead buzzing softly. Landon's heart beat in his ears. He couldn't shake the worry gnawing at him. As they reached an interrogation room, the officer opened the door and gestured for them to enter. "Please, sit down. The detective will be right with you." Landon nodded, his eyes darting over to Zara, who was now looking up at him with wide, innocent eyes. She had no idea what was going on, and he wanted to keep it that way. This was supposed to be something small, something that could be resolved. But the seriousness of the situation was sinking in. He felt his stomach twist. They sat in silence for a few minutes before a middle-aged man in a sharp suit entered the room. His face was stern, his eyes focused as he sat across from Landon. The man didn't waste any time. "Mr. Green, I'm Detective Harris. We're investigating the incident that occurred at your daughter's school earlier today." Landon nodded, trying to keep his voice steady. "I understand. What happened?" Detective Harris leaned forward, folding his hands on the table. "We've interviewed the other student involved in the altercation, Chris Thompson. His story doesn't quite match up with what your daughter has told us." Landon's chest tightened. What did that mean? He had seen Zara's face when she'd talked about what had happened. She had been upset, but she had been honest. Had Chris said something that cast doubt on her account? The detective continued, his voice lower now. "Chris has admitted that he's been bullying your daughter for weeks. However, we've uncovered some information that complicates things. Chris's father is a prominent figure in the community, and he's pressuring us to settle this quietly. We believe there's more to the story than we initially thought." Landon's mind was spinning. He had never imagined something like this would unfold. Why was Chris's father getting involved? What kind of pressure was he putting on the police? The detective paused, then added, "We believe the altercation today was more than just a push. We have reason to believe that Chris's actions were premeditated, and he may have been provoking your daughter for much longer than we thought. We need to investigate further." Landon's breath caught in his throat. Was Zara in danger? What was Chris capable of? "What happens now?" Landon asked, his voice hoarse. He looked at Zara, who was sitting quietly beside him, her eyes wide with confusion. Detective Harris gave him a reassuring look. "For now, we're going to continue our investigation. We'll be in touch with you if we need anything further." "Don't worry, Mr. Green. We're taking this very seriously. We'll make sure this is handled properly." Landon nodded, but the knot in his stomach didn't loosen. He stood up, Zara following his lead. "Thank you, Detective." As they walked out of the room, Landon's mind raced. He had always tried to protect Zara from harm, to shield her from the darker sides of life. But now he realized he couldn't protect her from everything. Chris, his father, the pressure from the outside world, it was all coming to a head. Outside, the crisp air hit him like a wave. Landon took a deep breath, trying to center himself. Zara tugged at his sleeve, looking up at him with innocent eyes. "Daddy, is everything going to be okay?" Landon forced a smile, kneeling down to her level. "Yes, sweetheart, everything is going to be okay." But in that moment, he wasn't sure anymore. The world had just become much more complicated. Zara's safety, her well-being, it had always been his #1 priority. But now, with the shadow of Chris's father looming over them, he had to wonder how much more he could protect her from. They walked back to the car in silence, the weight of the day pressing heavily on Landon's shoulders. As he started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot, his phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a message from Kendra. It was from an unknown number. Landon hesitated. He was tired of unanswered questions, of things pulling him in different directions. But he couldn't ignore it. Not now. He answered the phone, his voice steady but guarded. "Hello?" A woman's voice came through, smooth but urgent. "Mr. Green? It's Kendra Hayes. I know you're probably upset with me, but we need to talk. There are things that you don't understand, things that can't be ignored. Please, just give me a chance to explain." Landon's grip on the steering wheel tightened. He felt the pull again, the need to hear her out, to understand her side of things. But just as quickly, his thoughts returned to Zara, to everything he had promised to protect. "I don't know if I can do this, Kendra." Landon's voice was raw, torn between the emotions that were flooding his mind. You've put me in a really difficult situation. There was a pause on the other end of the line, as though Kendra was choosing her words carefully. I understand. But what's at stake is bigger than you think. I need you to listen. This is about more than just us. Landon didn't answer right away. His eyes flicked to Zara, who was still quiet in the passenger seat, her small hands clutching the seatbelt. What did Kendra mean? What was she really asking? Finally, he spoke, his voice low. I need time, Kendra. I need to figure this out. I'll call you when I'm ready. And without waiting for a response, Landon ended the call. He exhaled deeply, his mind swirling with thoughts he couldn't control. He had already made a choice, one that centered on Zara's safety and well-being. But he knew this wasn't over. There was more to the story, and no matter how much he tried to ignore it, he couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's talk about the choices that define us. More twists are coming, so make sure you don't miss out. Landon tossed the phone onto the passenger seat, the weight of the conversation lingering. He felt the pull to call Kendra back, to understand what she was really trying to say, but the thought of Zara, her trusting face beside him, reminded him of why he had made the decision to walk away in the first place. He had to focus. He couldn't let himself be distracted by someone else's emotional turmoil when his daughter's future was at stake. The drive home was quiet. The steady hum of the engine was the only sound, and Landon's mind continued to race. He couldn't help but think about Kendra's desperation, the way her words had been laced with more than just attraction. There was something deeper there, something unresolved that she couldn't just let go of. But he wasn't sure if he was ready to unravel that mystery. What did she really want from him? And why now? Why did she think he could solve her problems? As they pulled into the parking lot of their building, Landon tried to shake off the tension. Zara was already unbuckling her seatbelt, ready to jump out and continue her day. But as he looked at her, his heart ached. She deserved a simple, happy life, free from the complexities of adult relationships and the baggage that came with them. She didn't need the chaos that Kendra's presence had introduced. Let's go inside, sweetheart. It's getting cold. Landon's voice was firm but gentle. Zara's smile was a welcome relief. She was okay. In this moment, that was all that mattered. Once inside their apartment, Landon helped Zara take off her coat, and they settled into their usual routine. The smell of leftover spaghetti lingered in the kitchen, and Zara sat at the table, happily munching on her dinner as Landon cleaned up. It wasn't much, just the two of them, side by side, going about their day. But it was enough. This was the kind of life he had always wanted to give her. Simple. Safe. Stable. He had to protect that at all costs. Later that night, as Zara was tucked into bed, Landon stood in the doorway, watching her sleep. The house was quiet again, and for the first time in what felt like days, he exhaled, allowing his shoulders to relax. Tomorrow would be a new day, a day where he could focus on being the kind of father Zara needed, without the distractions that had been clouding his mind. But as he turned to walk away, his phone buzzed again. Kendra. Landon stopped dead in his tracks, staring at the screen. He thought about just ignoring it, but something inside him told him he couldn't do that. Not yet. With a deep breath, he picked it up, his thumb hovering over the screen. Landon, I've been thinking. I understand you need space, but I'm not asking you to fix everything. I just need to talk to you. I'm sorry if I crossed a line, but it's about more than what happened between us. Please just listen. He read the message, his chest tightening. What could she possibly want now? Landon's grip on the phone tightened as the weight of the decision pressed down on him. He couldn't ignore it anymore. He had to know what this was about. What Kendra wanted, what this situation was really about. He didn't want to get tangled up in something that could jeopardize everything he had worked for, but curiosity gnawed at him. What if this was something he couldn't walk away from? He let out a shaky breath and texted back, "Fine. I'll listen, but this is the last time." Seconds later, his phone buzzed again, and this time, it was a call. Landon's heart rate picked up. This was it. He answered, the tension thick in the air. "Hello?" Kendra's voice came through, soft but strained. "Landon, thank you for picking up. I know this is a lot, but I need you to understand something." Landon braced himself. "I'm listening." She paused, and then the words came, heavy with emotion. "I'm not trying to complicate your life, Landon, but I've been living a lie for so long. I thought I could just bury everything, my feelings, my unhappiness, everything, but I can't anymore. And I know that what happened wasn't right. But you made me feel something real. For the first time in a long time, I felt alive." Landon's chest tightened. Her words were a mixture of confusion and desperation, but he could sense the rawness beneath them, the vulnerability. This wasn't just about him, not really. This was about Kendra dealing with her own inner turmoil, the loneliness that had driven her to take such extreme actions. "Kendra, I don't know what you want from me. I have a life, a daughter I need to take care of." Landon's voice was firm, but there was a tremor in it. He wasn't sure if it was anger or guilt. She spoke quickly, almost pleading. "I know, Landon. I'm not asking you to fix my life or to be part of it. I can't keep living like this. But maybe, if you understand, we can both move on. We can find closure. I need closure, Landon." Landon ran a hand through his hair. He had walked away from her before. But the pull of this conversation, the unfinished business between them, had kept him tied to it. Was this his chance for closure? "What do you want from me, Kendra?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The question had been building in him, but he wasn't sure he wanted to hear the answer. There was a long pause, and when she spoke again, her voice was steady, almost resigned. "I need you to know that I never meant to hurt you. I was selfish, but I never wanted to cause you any pain. I've been battling my own demons for too long, and I think I just needed to hear that someone cared, that I mattered to someone other than my husband." Landon's heart sank. He wanted to hang up. He wanted to walk away and never look back. But there was something about Kendra's voice, so small, so vulnerable, that made him hesitate. He exhaled slowly, rubbing his temple. "I don't know what to say." Kendra's voice softened. "Just say that you understand, that you get it, that I'm not some villain in your life. Please, Landon." He paused. Could he give her that? Could he offer her something that might allow him to finally move on? "I understand, Kendra, but I need to move forward. I need to focus on my daughter." There was a long silence before she spoke again. "I know, thank you." With that, Landon ended the call. He stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of the conversation hang in the air. It wasn't easy, but he knew it was the right thing. He had given Kendra the closure she needed, and now it was time for him to do the same. As Landon walked into the living room, Zara was already sitting on the couch, flipping through a book. She looked up at him with a smile, her eyes full of innocence. "Daddy, what did the lady want?" Landon smiled softly, walking over to sit beside her. "Just some things to think about, sweetheart. But we're okay. We're together, and that's all that matters." Zara nodded and leaned into him, her head resting against his shoulder. Landon looked out the window, the night now quiet, the weight of the world feeling just a little lighter. "If you've made it this far, I want to hear your thoughts. What do you think Landon should do next? Should he move on from the past, or is there something more he still has to figure out?" Landon sat there for a moment, the weight of the day finally starting to settle in. Zara was quietly nestled against him, her soft breathing a reminder of everything he was fighting for. The peace of the evening, so rare in the past few days, seemed to pull him out of the haze of uncertainty that had clouded his thoughts. For the first time in what felt like weeks, he felt like he could breathe. He glanced down at his phone again. The message from Kendra had been a turning point, an end to the chapter that had begun in the office. He had given her the closure she needed, and now he was ready to turn his focus back to his daughter. But there was still something unsettling about how all of this had unfolded. The tension that had built up between him and Kendra felt unfinished. But he couldn't afford to go down that path again. Zara tugged gently at his sleeve, pulling him back to the present. "Daddy, will we get a Christmas tree soon?" Her eyes sparkled with excitement, the innocence in her question reminding him of how important it was to make this holiday memorable for her. "Of course, sweetheart." Landon smiled, running a hand through her hair. "How about we go tomorrow and pick one out together?" Zara grinned. "I want the biggest one, the one that touches the ceiling." Landon chuckled softly. It was exactly the kind of distraction he needed. Something simple, something pure. Zara's world was one filled with joy and laughter, and he would do everything he could to make sure it stayed that way. Later that evening, after Zara had gone to bed, Landon sat in the living room, his thoughts still unsettled. The calm of the night had brought him some peace, but there was a nagging feeling that he couldn't shake. The phone call from Kendra. The way she had begged for his understanding. It lingered. He had made the right decision, hadn't he? He had chosen Zara. He had to. There was no room in his life for complications, not when it came to her. But still, a part of him couldn't help but wonder if he had missed something. Was there more to Kendra's story? Was there a deeper reason for her actions? The clock ticked quietly in the background, each second echoing in his mind. Just as he was about to get up and head to bed, his phone buzzed again. Landon glanced at it with a mix of apprehension and curiosity. Another message from Kendra. "Landon, I don't expect anything from you. I just want you to know that I'll always be grateful for what you did. You reminded me that I'm still human. You gave me something real. Thank you." Landon stared at the screen, the weight of her words settling over him. Gratitude. Was that all this was? Just a moment of clarity for Kendra? Or was there something deeper that he hadn't yet understood? With a sigh, Landon set the phone down again. This was done. There was no turning back. He couldn't afford to get caught up in the confusion any longer. His focus needed to be on Zara, on making her life as full of love and security as possible. But just as the thoughts of the day started to fade, the sound of Zara's soft voice interrupted his quiet contemplation. "Daddy?" Landon turned, startled. Zara was standing in the doorway, her small frame silhouetted by the light from the hallway. She rubbed her eyes sleepily, clearly half awake. "Hey, sweetie, what's wrong?" Landon asked, getting up and walking over to her. Zara sniffled and climbed into his arms without saying a word. Landon could feel her warmth against him, the soft weight of her body providing comfort for both of them. She buried her face in his chest, her little hands clutching his shirt. "I had a bad dream, Daddy." Zara's voice was muffled but clear, the fear still lingering in her words. Landon hugged her tighter, trying to soothe her. "It's okay, baby, you're safe, you're with me." Zara looked up at him with wide, frightened eyes. "Will you stay with me tonight?" Landon's heart ached as he nodded. "Of course, sweetheart, I'm here. I'll stay with you, always." He walked back to her room, laying down beside her in the small bed. He pulled the blanket up around them both, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't known in a long time. Zara's breathing slowed as she settled against him, her little hand finding his. "Daddy?" she whispered softly. "Yeah?" Landon whispered back, his voice barely above a breath. "I love you." Landon smiled, his chest tightening with emotion. "I love you too, sweetheart, more than anything." And with that, the house grew quiet once again, the world outside fading into nothing. Landon closed his eyes, letting the rhythmic sound of Zara's breathing calm his mind. This was where he was meant to be. In the morning, they would get the Christmas tree. They would start their holiday traditions. Together. And no matter what had happened in the past, he would make sure Zara's world was filled with nothing but love, laughter, and light. As Landon finally drifted off to sleep, he felt a sense of clarity that had been missing for so long. The decisions he had made, the path he had chosen, they were the right ones. Zara's future, his responsibility as a father, would always come first. Everything else was secondary. The next morning came quickly, the sunlight creeping through the blinds as Landon slowly stirred from sleep. Zara was still curled up next to him, her small form snug against his side. The warmth of her body and the weight of the blanket around them made the room feel safe, as though nothing in the world could reach them. Landon gently lifted his arm from around her and stood up, careful not to wake her. He walked to the kitchen, his mind still lingering on everything that had happened over the past few days. Kendra's calls, the messages, the undeniable confusion that had settled in his chest. But as he poured himself a cup of coffee, he reminded himself of the decision he'd already made. Zara was everything. He had made that promise long ago, and nothing, not Kendra, not anything else could take away from that. The kettle whistled, pulling him from his thoughts. He poured the hot water over his coffee and took a long sip, the warmth spreading through him. He stared out the window at the quiet morning, the sun beginning to bathe the city in soft, golden light. Everything felt still. For the first time in a long time, there was a sense of calm that he hadn't realized he needed so desperately. Just as he was about to sit down, Zara's voice came from the bedroom, small and sleepy. "Daddy?" Landon smiled to himself, setting his cup down. "Hey, sweetie. You awake?" Zara's voice was groggy as she padded into the kitchen, her hair messy and her eyes half closed. She stretched, then yawned, wrapping her arms around his legs. "I'm hungry." Landon chuckled softly and knelt down to her level. "Of course, sweetheart, let's get you some breakfast." They spent the next hour together in a calm, familiar rhythm. They made pancakes, Zara's favorite, and Landon added a few chocolate chips to make it extra special. As they ate, Zara told him about her plans for the day. She wanted to play with her new toys, maybe decorate the tree later, and she was excited about their upcoming Christmas outing. Landon listened intently, soaking in every word. This was the world he wanted to protect. As the morning passed, the weight of yesterday seemed to lift from his shoulders. He focused entirely on Zara, on making her feel loved and safe. For the first time in a long time, he realized how much he had been missing by allowing distractions to pull him away from what truly mattered. When breakfast was finished, Landon quickly cleared the table and grabbed his coat. Zara, already dressed in a bright red sweater, was practically bouncing with excitement. "Ready to get that tree?" Landon asked, a grin spreading across his face. Zara nodded enthusiastically, grabbing her coat and running for the door. "Let's go, Daddy. Let's get the biggest one." Landon laughed, following her out the door. The crisp winter air hit them as they stepped outside, and Zara immediately pulled her coat tighter, her small boots crunching through the snow. As they made their way to the lot, Landon couldn't help but feel a sense of peace settle in. This, he reminded himself, was everything he had been working toward. They spent the next hour searching through the lot, inspecting every tree, until Zara finally picked the one she wanted. It was big, full, with bright green needles that smelled of pine. Landon chuckled at her enthusiasm as she insisted they pick the tallest one, and he couldn't help but indulge her. After all, it was Christmas. Once they had the tree secured, Landon and Zara headed back home, their hearts light and their spirits high. They spent the rest of the day decorating, stringing lights around the tree, hanging ornaments, and even tossing a few snowballs outside. The day felt like it had taken them back to simpler times, when everything was wrapped in joy and possibility. As night fell, the lights from the tree twinkled in the living room, casting a soft glow over the room. Zara was already curled up on the couch, her eyes heavy with sleep, as Landon finished putting the final touches on the tree. He sat next to her, gently stroking her hair as she leaned into him, content and peaceful. He felt a deep sense of satisfaction watching her, knowing that despite all the complications of the past few days, they had created a moment of pure joy. He kissed her forehead gently. "I love you, sweetheart." "I love you too, Daddy," Zara mumbled as her eyelids fluttered closed. Landon watched her for a while, his mind quiet. The storm of uncertainty that had surrounded him had passed, leaving only clarity. His choices were clear. Zara was his world, and as long as he could keep providing her with moments like this, with love and stability, he would have everything he needed. Everything would be okay. As he finally turned off the lights and settled in for the night, Landon couldn't help but feel a profound sense of gratitude. He had weathered the storm, and now, with Zara by his side, he was ready to face whatever came next, with or without the complications of the past. If you're still following the story, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What would you have done in Landon's position? Should he have reached out to Kendra again, or did he make the right call? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories of tough choices and redemption. There's always more to come. Thank you for joining me on this journey. The following days passed quietly, the hustle and bustle of the holiday season beginning to fill the air with a sense of cheer. The apartment was filled with the sweet scent of pine from their Christmas tree, and Zara's excitement seemed to grow with each passing moment. Landon was determined to make this Christmas special for her, to create memories that she could carry with her, memories that would overshadow the complications he'd been through. As they finished their decorating, Landon found himself reflecting on the choices he had made over the past few weeks. The decision to walk away from Kendra felt more certain now, more like the right choice. He had been honest with himself about his feelings, and he knew his duty was to Zara, to be the father she needed. There was no room for anything else, but even with that clarity, there was still an underlying weight that refused to go away. The phone calls from Kendra had stopped, but the lingering emotions from their encounters remained. He found himself asking more questions than before. Had he been too quick to walk away? Was there something left unsaid between them? But each time the thought surfaced, he quickly reminded himself of his priorities. Zara mattered. She always would. And in this moment, as she played with her toys beside him, his heart swelled with the peace he had been searching for. It was late afternoon when Landon's phone buzzed again, pulling him from his thoughts. He glanced at it, half expecting it to be Kendra. But when he saw the name on the screen, his heart sank. It was the school principal, Ms. Winters. With a deep breath, Landon answered the call, trying to keep his voice steady. "Hello? Mr. Green, I need to speak with you about an urgent matter regarding Zara." Ms. Winters' voice was calm, but Landon could hear the underlying concern. His stomach tightened. What happened? Is Zara okay? "She's fine, Mr. Green, but there's something we need to address. It's about Chris Thompson, the student who had the altercation with Zara. His father is escalating the situation, and we need to ensure that Zara's safety is a top priority. I'd like to meet with you to discuss this further." Landon's pulse quickened. He hadn't expected things to take such a turn. "I'll be there as soon as possible." After hanging up, he looked over at Zara, who had been listening to the conversation, her innocent eyes now filled with confusion. "Daddy, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice small. Landon knelt beside her, his heart heavy. "Nothing's wrong, sweetheart. We just need to go to the school for a little bit. It's about the boy who upset you." She nodded, not fully understanding, but sensing the shift in his mood. Landon gave her a reassuring smile before he grabbed his coat and rushed out the door. The drive to the school was a blur of emotions. Landon's mind raced. What was Chris's father trying to do? The fact that the situation was escalating, that Chris's father was involved only deepened his concern. He had already seen the way the school had handled the situation, and he trusted them to do what was right. But the involvement of powerful figures like Chris's father worried him. When they arrived at the school, Landon met with Ms. Winters in her office. She was waiting for him, her face calm but serious. "Mr. Green, thank you for coming." Ms. Winters motioned for him to sit. "I wanted to give you a heads up. Chris's father, Mr. Thompson, has been pressuring the school to sweep the incident under the rug. He's demanding that we retract Zara's statement and portray the situation as a misunderstanding on her part. We cannot allow that to happen. We are taking this seriously, but I need your permission to proceed with the next steps." Landon's stomach churned. He hadn't expected this. The situation was already complicated enough, but now, the threat of someone using their influence to manipulate the truth weighed heavily on him. "What exactly do you need me to do?" he asked, his voice tight. "We need to make sure that Zara feels safe. We'll be working with law enforcement to document everything properly and investigate further. I want you to know that we have her best interests at heart. However, I will need your support in this. This is not something we can ignore." Landon nodded, his jaw set. "I'm with you. Do whatever needs to be done to protect my daughter." As the meeting concluded, Landon couldn't shake the sense of unease that had settled in his chest. The situation was spiraling, and there was no telling how far Chris's father would go to protect his son, but Landon wasn't backing down. Zara's safety came first. Nothing else mattered. Later that night, as they returned home, Landon couldn't help feel the weight of everything pressing down on him. Zara was quiet as they walked inside, and he could sense her unease. He crouched down to her level, looking into her eyes. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" She nodded but said nothing, her small hands gripping his. Landon pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her in a protective embrace. "I'm here, Zara. I'm always going to protect you." He kissed the top of her head, his heart aching with the gravity of his promise. As they settled into the evening, Landon's thoughts remained on the school, on the escalating pressure from Chris's father. The stress of it all had taken a toll on him, but his resolve was unwavering. He would fight for Zara, no matter what. Just as he was about to head to bed, his phone buzzed again. This time, it was a notification, another message from Kendra. "I know you're focused on your daughter, Landon, and I understand, but there's something I need to tell you, something that might change everything. Please, when you're ready, reach out." Landon stared at the screen for a moment. The pull of her words, the unanswered questions that still lingered, threatened to drag him in once more. But as he set the phone down, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was no longer his fight to fight. He was done with that chapter. Zara's future, her happiness, was the only thing that mattered now. The next few days were a blur of meetings and tense moments, as Landon navigated the complicated situation with Chris and his father. The school had taken all the necessary steps to ensure Zara's safety, and Landon felt a bit of relief knowing they were taking the matter seriously. Still, the weight of the pressure from Chris's family, especially with the looming threat of influence, hung over him. He couldn't let his guard down. Zara, sensing the change in the atmosphere, grew quieter, more withdrawn than usual. Landon did his best to shield her from the stress of it all, but there was no hiding the tension that had crept into their lives. Every time he saw her, his heart ached. This wasn't the life he wanted for her. She deserved joy, safety, and peace, not the complicated mess of adults trying to solve their own problems. It was late on a Wednesday evening when Landon found himself alone in the living room, the soft glow of the Christmas lights from the tree flickering in the corner. Zara had finally drifted off to sleep after a long day of playing with her friends. Landon hadn't expected to get any messages, but when his phone buzzed again, he knew exactly who it was. He opened the message from Kendra. "Landon, I'm not sure how to say this, but I think you need to know the truth. I never meant for things to get so complicated. You've been on my mind constantly, and I don't know if this makes sense, but there's something I need to tell you. Something that might change everything. Please, just listen. Landon stared at the message, his fingers frozen above the screen. The pull to respond was strong, but he knew what this could lead to. He had walked away from the situation for a reason. Kendra's confession had been clear, but the more he allowed himself to get pulled back into her world, the further he strayed from what really mattered. Zara. He set the phone down with a heavy sigh. As much as Kendra's words haunted him, he knew deep down he couldn't afford to open that door again. The truth was, he had made his choice, and Zara needed him more than ever. The world outside was full of distractions, full of complications, but right here, right now, was the only place Landon felt truly at peace. His phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't from Kendra. It was a notification from the school. "Mr. Green, this is Miss Winters from the school. We wanted to update you on the situation with Chris Thompson. We've contacted local law enforcement as a precaution, and we are moving forward with a formal investigation. We'll be in touch with any new developments." Landon's heart skipped a beat. The situation had escalated further than he could have imagined. He had hoped it would remain a simple matter between the school and Chris's parents. But now it was clear that there were deeper issues at play. His mind flashed back to the meeting with Miss Winters and the words that had stuck with him. Chris's father had a lot of influence in the community. It wasn't just about Chris anymore. It was about protecting Zara, keeping her safe in a world that was already proving to be full of threats, big and small. Landon stood up and walked to Zara's room, quietly opening the door. He watched her for a moment, her small body curled up under the covers, the faint rise and fall of her chest offering a small sense of comfort. He could see her peaceful face, the innocence in her expression, and it reminded him once again of everything he was fighting for. He closed the door gently behind him, his mind racing. What was the next step? What could he do to make sure Zara was safe? The pressure was mounting. It wasn't just about Chris anymore. It was about the world he was trying to build for his daughter. A world free from the complications of adults' mistakes and missteps. And that meant he couldn't afford to get caught up in anything that would jeopardize that future. The following morning, Landon took a deep breath as he sat at the kitchen table, trying to figure out the next move. He knew he had to keep his head clear, focus on the immediate task at hand, Zara. But something told him that things were far from over. The Thompson family had influence, and Chris's father wouldn't back down easily. When Zara came running into the kitchen, her eyes wide with excitement, Landon quickly pushed his concerns aside. She jumped into his arms, smiling brightly. "Daddy, can we go get hot chocolate today?" Landon smiled and kissed her forehead. "Of course, sweetheart. We'll go right after breakfast." It was a simple request, but it grounded him. Zara was still a kid. She didn't need to be involved in the chaos that had been creeping into their lives. He took a deep breath and focused on her, on making sure she felt safe and loved. Nothing else mattered. As the day unfolded, Landon took Zara to the local cafe, their usual spot. He let her pick out a special treat and they sat by the window, watching the snow fall outside. It was a moment of normalcy, a moment of peace amidst the storm of everything else. Landon knew this was what he had to hold on to. For now, it was just them, Zara and him, and that was enough. But deep down, he knew that the storm wasn't over. Chris's father wouldn't stop until he had control of the situation. And Landon had to be ready for whatever came next. But for today, all he could do was hold on to his daughter, to the life they had built together, and hope that the rest of the world would understand just how far he would go to protect it.